I did something really risky. We decided that I would take a 6-week sabbatical. All of my 22 clients that I had in the VA agency, I let them all go. I did not promise them anything. I didn't know. I didn't have any type of plan. When people think about burnout, they think, oh, I could just self-care more. That doesn't fix burnout. It's a structural issue within your life, and you have to redesign your life to get out of burnout.
What if your business was profitable, in demand, and growing fast, yet you felt more stuck than you ever had before? Imagine reaching a point where every new client meant more hours, more stress, and an accelerating path towards total burnout. Our guest today was at that exact breaking point in 2020, trapped in a successful looking agency that relied entirely on her being everywhere at once. She made a choice that most founders would find terrifying, but it allowed her to transform from a manual bottleneck into a high-level strategic architect. Today, she's going to share how she replaced that overwhelming chaos with a structure that finally supports her life rather than consuming it. Welcome to today's episode of Your Business Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Shapiro, and my guest today is Simone Little. Simone, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jeremy. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Me too. I love getting to know you, in our time before the show and figuring out this really incredible arc that you've had in your journey as an entrepreneur. So if we rewind back to, your beginnings, you jumped into this really competitive space with a VA agency and helping folks out with virtual assistant or VA work. And that is not where you are today. So take us back in time. You got into a really competitive space. Why did you get in to that market? How did you differentiate? And what was your vision you had when you launched the business?
Yeah. So what an exciting time in my life as you kind of put me back right in that space that I was those years ago. So my first business was a hair salon, and coming out of that with children, I needed somewhere that didn't require me to be on my feet because of health concerns. And so I had my paralegal degree, my legal secretary certification. I had worked in a law firm as a legal secretary, and I did all the administrative work for the salon. I did everything with the team, the marketing, it was all on me. And I had this moment where my sister was like, you should just do this for other people. And I was like, oh, this is brilliant. Actually, yes, let me go ahead and do that. Now, I will say that back then, being a virtual assistant isn't as big as what you see it as right now along the industry. There weren't as many of us, right? And so it was a great time to come in, a great time to position myself in that way. And I didn't necessarily have a niche, but what I did at that time was I was heavy on Instagram, and I was in everybody's direct messages, their DMs asking for business. None of it worked, but it got me in the feeling of continuing to ask, and I was able to find other opportunities in other places. But it did help build my voice. When people did need someone who did what I did, they sought out the agency. So it was really great practice. I enjoyed my time as the owner of that agency.
So what did that initial phase of growth feel like as you were successfully building up to a full portfolio of clients you were doing this work with?
Initially, it felt like this is absolutely amazing. Oh my goodness, it's working. As entrepreneurs, we have these ideas and we think it's going to work, but we never really know. So as people kept saying yes, I was like, to me, a little bit of that really to me. But I had a lot of referrals throughout that time. So it was great to know that I was being trusted, and that people wanted to work with me and they wanted others to have the same experience that they did with working with me. It even got to a point where some of my clients were like, so outside of this agency, how can I just get you to myself? And so that felt really good.
What you have there for our listeners is so common in earlier, younger businesses is this growth from referrals. Right? Word of mouth is great. In fact, there are many large businesses still entirely built on word of mouth. So that's really powerful. But at a certain point, your business got to this plateau where you were profitable on paper, which is good, but you felt completely stuck. What did that plateau look like? How is that impacting you in your daily life?
It looked like working 14-hour days, sometimes 17-hour days at home during COVID with two kids who I never saw, which was crazy because we were all stuck in the house. And you would think that would be prime time, but that wasn't the case for me. It looked like me getting the work done, but the quality suffering. It looked like me hiring from a panic state, not giving anybody proper onboarding or training, and them being just as confused and getting things extremely wrong. It led to tears. It led to feeling as though I was trapped in a bubble that I can never get out of. It was difficult. Like the money in my bank account, it looked amazing, but everything else around it was complete trash.
When we talk about wealth, some people think that means like just financial wealth, but there's so much more beyond that. And while you were crushing it on the money side of things, the bank account showed that those other areas were really not performing anywhere near where you wanted them to be. And that is that burnout that we see so often with business owners hustling harder, working longer hours, giving it their all, but at this great cost, not a financial cost, but this great cost life-wise. So the business relied on you. You were the primary person. Everything relied on that. What did that mean, like health-wise, energy-wise, when it's all you all the time?
It was so much stress. I had built out this quote unquote agency model, but an agency model doesn't actually work unless there are other people to help carry the workload. Otherwise, you're really just doing it solo with a little help here and there, right? And so energetically, there was no energy for anything else in my life. There was no time spent in any other area of my life. I wasn't really marketing at that point. Like, how could I? There was no time to take on new clients, and the referrals just kept coming in. And so energetically, my energy was tanked. There was nothing left to give to anyone, even to my clients. I remember trying to, on a couple of different occasions, one thing that I always struggled with is client calls. And that's because I had so much work. Like in this VA agency, we were doing email marketing, social media marketing. We were doing operations. We were doing a whole litany of different tasks. And it was hard to take client calls. So I remember consistently trying to rework my client calls to the point where I said, I cannot have on my calendar consistent client calls and try to do anything work-wise for the clients. And so I would send out an email every Monday and say, look, if you want to talk to me this week, here's your 15-minute meeting, book it or don't, but you got 24 hours. Somehow they were receptive to that because I don't know how I would have felt. But I guess because the work was indeed getting done, although I didn't think the quality was where it needed to be. So yeah, it was definitely challenging from an energy standpoint.
So how did you fix this capacity problem? Because you can't just be you. What did you do to shift that around?
So I did something really risky. I remember talking to a friend on the phone one day during my work hours, and she was a new friend. So she didn't know like all of my background. We had met a couple months ago and we had became good friends quickly. And she said to me, hey, not to be in your business, but how much money do you have in the bank right now? And I was like, I'm doing all right. I got some money in there. And she said, I wonder if you could just take a break. I was like, what do you mean? If you could just not work for a little while. She's like, talk to your husband. See if it makes sense. Because he was furloughed, so he wasn't bringing in any income. It was just mine at that point, during the pandemic. And I was like, let me look into this. I went back, I talked to my husband, and we decided that I would take a 6-week sabbatical, which really meant that all of my 22 clients that I had in the VA agency, I let them all go. I did not promise them anything. I didn't say, hey, in 6 weeks, I'll be back and pick up the same services. I promised nothing. What I promised is a month from now, I will let you know where I am, because I didn't know. I didn't have any type of plan. 80% of the clients took it really well. They understood. The other 20%, they felt personally betrayed. And I get it. We all react differently, but that was the choice that I had to make, because there was nothing that I was going to really be able to do as severe as it was to pause. Like when people think about burnout, they think, oh, I can just self-care more. That doesn't fix burnout. It's a structural issue within your life, and you have to redesign your life to get out of burnout. And so that sabbatical was going to allow me to redesign what I wanted for my life and business.
Are you enjoying this episode? Make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. That'll help you get more episodes automatically as soon as they come out. So hit that subscribe button right now. And if you have a minute, leave a quick rating and review. That helps support the show. Yeah, I love that you have framed that it's not just this temporary fix, not this crash diet, as it were, right? But you actually stepped away without that plan for like, we'll resume to normal operations after this commercial break, right? You really went into this saying, I don't know what's going to come out of this, but I've got to step away. And so many successful entrepreneurs, I hear that exact same thing from, whether it's getting offline for 6 weeks, whether it's, going on a trip, going backpacking, right? Going to that proverbial desert island, but it's truly stepping away from that business and giving yourself space, not checking messages in a different destination, but being totally away from that. So that's great that you're able to do that. Not everyone feels they can do that, but walk me through the benefit. Like, what was the upside you saw to stepping away from the business for that period of time?
Well, the immediate upside was me spending time with my children. The first thing that I did, I said, okay, how can I make my home more paradise-like? Because right now it's chaos. I bought my kids bunk beds because my daughter was still in the crib and my son was in a single bed. I bought them bunk beds. I redesigned their room so they could be more comfortable. That's really something, my husband's here, but that's really something like a woman does. Like they're the ones who like try to architect certain things. I created a cozy corner for me and my husband inside of our bedroom so we could come and relax and spend time together during that time. So those were some immediate things that I did. After that, I just kind of took a step back and I said, what do I actually love and enjoy inside of my business? What are the things that I feel like I can do and not feel so constricted by? And what can I charge more for? Because the VA business, while great, while profitable, a lot of hours to get to that level of profitability that I was no longer willing to spend or compromise on. And so I had to kind of take a couple of steps back and figure out what it was that I wanted to do. And then I figured out after that, what does every day look like for me? What are the things that I enjoy doing in the morning that make me excited about the day? Doing my makeup, pouring myself a cup of coffee, having time to actually eat, right? Meditation, prayer, like all these things that I was neglecting that I actually enjoyed. So I really started to plan and map those things out. So I knew what I didn't want to sacrifice going back into my work world.
So what I'm hearing is you had a business. It was profitable. It was generating revenue. It was filling the bank account, but that wasn't a good fit life-wise. So you got the space from the business. You rethought, retooled, and looked, how do I come back in and do the work you want to do and be compensated at a better level for doing that? So at your lowest point, you realize the work you're doing was actually this high-level strategy rather than just the simple support. Talk to us about sort of the change in positioning and what you came out of, that sabbatical idea-wise, and how you then moved to that next level in your business.
Yeah. And so something that happened right before I took that sabbatical is I joined a coaching program, actually. And in that coaching program, there were different types of challenges and things like that she had us do. And one of it was like to sell 100 of this product or make 10K in 10 days or something like that. And I remember I had created this new offering that was like a 1-hour strategy session, and people were buying it like a lot. And I was like, oh, I'm really good at this strategic part. Not only were they buying it, they were coming back with actual results from implementing it. And that was really impressive to me because it really just meant all these years that I've done all of this work, from the salon to being in the legal field to working behind people's businesses as a virtual assistant. I've gotten all of this information and data and all these strategies. And when I give it to someone in a way that fits, it works. So, okay, great, right? So when I took that time away, I said, I really enjoy having those conversations. I really enjoy seeing that type of progress for clients. And I started to do research. Well, who's the person who does these type of strategies in a business? How are corporations set up for this? How does someone work inside of a corporation to do this? And I remember I looked, and the term COO kept coming up. It kept coming up. And there was one study by, I think it was like Harvard Business Review, that I really, really enjoyed. And it said that a COO is one of the most undefined positions within a corporation. Someone can bring in a COO to help train up a young CEO. They can bring them in to really kind of take over the business outside of the CEO. They could bring them in for just their expertise because they're the missing piece. There's so many different reasons. And I found with my clients, they have a couple of different reasons in which they were using me as a virtual assistant and how I can serve them in that capacity. That's not an operations manager, but to give them high level experience because they're new in business and I no longer was. And so I started to look at what a starting price point would look like, doing research, figuring out how much do I need to make? How much does a position like this pay? And how much are the clients that I fired who I plan on repitching? How much are they going to be willing to pay me to do this?
I want to double click into the earlier product that you were trying out, these strategy sessions, these 1 hour calls. How were all of those new customers finding you to hire you for that?
It was Instagram. I remember I had one client who had a larger following, and we had been in each other's atmosphere from all those days of pitching in the VA days. I did all that pitching and none of it really took. Well, we connected during that time. So when I started offering the service, she was like, oh yes, I need this. She booked. She told a friend. That friend told a friend, that friend told a friend, and they were all posting on social media after these sessions because there was a deliverable that they received after it. And so they would post the deliverable, post how they were using the strategy in their life and in their business. And it just continued to grow from there.
Now, was that an intentional task you had for them? Like, go post this thing, or was that organically happening? Like, how much were you influencing that viral effect?
Well, I did ask for reviews. I gave them a review form. They filled it out and gave it back to me. Right. So that I did ask for. Everything else was extra. I was very shocked and excited, when it started to happen at first. But I'm like, when people have something in their hand that they can use every day, they want to share it because they want other people to benefit from it. So I asked for the written reviews, but they on their own did the social reviews.
So I'm hearing two great things there for our listeners. One is make sure you always ask for your reviews, which is great. And two is when you provide a deliverable, when someone can walk away with something of value, obviously worth more than what they've paid, it's a much easier referral, right? And anything that you're selling or offering, you want the perceived value of that to be higher than that perceived cost, because that makes it a no-brainer purchase, right? And that's one of the things we talk about in the book all the time is no matter where your price point is, your products are, your services, always make sure that value is much higher. So super well done on that. I love that. All right. So moving forward, right, you started to shift the business and put on that not so well-defined hat of COO to the point even HBR couldn't define what a COO was. How did you define what a COO was and start to offer that to clients?
I really love that question. So what I put together were the 5 areas of business and house strategy, my 5 areas. Now, these aren't the 5 areas that everyone is going to consider but for the subset of clientele that I served. I knew that these were the 5 areas that they needed the most. They needed sales and marketing. They needed team. They needed CEO development. They needed actual operations, and they needed finance. Like these were their 5 areas. And within those 5 areas, I defined how strategy benefits them, the type of strategy, the type of deliverables they would get within that strategy, and how I work with them every day to make better decisions that benefit their bottom line and their impact. I remember one client saying to me, I had repitched her, and we ended up working together for probably about 3 or 4 years, and we're still really great friends today. And one thing that I had put in there was the finance portion and profit planning. I had a lot of great tools at that point where I could help someone to map out where their profit should be coming from, how much they should be charging. I did auto calculations, just like resources in understanding. And so that is what got her. That's why she hired me. Although I had everything else, she said, knowing how to profit plan and understanding money is something that I'm not as confident as I want to be in doing. And so I was like, great. I remember another client needed someone to work directly with their team. They didn't want to manage everyone on their team directly, and they needed someone who could actually manage and lead their team. So for them, that was a value add. And so I really just mapped out all 5 areas of business, really mapped out in the proposal stage what it would look like if I worked with them. And a lot of these people already have familiarity with how I work, either through the VA business, or some of them bought that coaching the coaching session, which was like their little mini intro, their little taste of what it could be like if we partnered together long term. And so that really helped me get over the edge when I came back to not say, I was nervous. What if I come back and everyone says no? And then what? And the money's ran out that we've saved. But that really helped me get over the hump and have people say yes by saying that this is explicitly what we do in these different areas.
So these 5 different areas, would you say that your clients work through all of those in a linear fashion with you, or do they come in with one of them has a high need and the rest of them they'll deal with later? Like, how do you work that process as you're onboarding a new client and figuring out what their most urgent needs are and where you can help them best?
Yeah. So the first thing I do is we do a business audit. So we do that business audit. It's usually about 4 hours long, and we go through each area of the business and the roadblocks that they have. And what if we can identify what the roadblocks are and which ones are costing the CEO mental space, which ones are costing the company money, and which one is costing their culture impact. That is kind of how we determine where to start. So all of my clients at some point touch all 5 areas, but what we touch first comes out of that study, that deep dive that I do. Because one thing that I'm really like on the nose about, I don't give recommendations without true understanding. I feel like that's such a misstep that I see people in similar industries or do similar things to mine do. They're so quick to offer up something. I want to truly and deeply understand not just what's going on, but I want to understand historically what's already happened in their business. So I'm not giving them something that they already know isn't going to work, and something that they're not going to do because mentally they're just not ready for that step yet.
So what I'm hearing for our listeners is that through all the work that you did, you were able to codify and create a framework around a lot of these best practices. And that instead of just implementing the same thing the same way with everyone, you start off with that audit to understand not just where they are, but also where they've been. And that allows you to, in a far more personal way, apply those best practices to the business. Super well done. All right. So you shifted from doing this like task work as a VA to now selling outcomes and decision-making support, right? How did that change the way you viewed the transactions with your clients in terms of being a one-off or a time-based to now being outcome-based?
Yeah, they trust me. In a simple term, they really trust me, and they value my partnership. And so it's no longer their wins, it's now our wins. It's now what we're doing. They aren't feeling lonely in their business anymore because they know that they're not the only one thinking about what's best for the business health. And that's been really impactful and honestly really enjoyable. Coming from the VA business where it was just a task and it got done and it got checked to saying, hey, here's how we created a whole new service line for the business. Here is how we marketed it. Here's how we met KPIs with the amount of clients we wanted to get in it. And here's how the team fulfilled what the service was. And here's how it worked. It's so much more fulfilling than saying, yeah, I wrote the email.
Yeah, the shift from like a market price offer to a value-based offer is huge, especially in the services space. And I love these stories. I'm sure you have many of these with your clients as well, where shifting that pricing to a value-based pricing allows you to A, differentiate, B, tie compensation to outcome, C, increase the profit margin, right? And D, charge what something is really worth, right? And those are all really, really valuable, good things. So super well done on that. What would you say was like the hardest part about like walking away from this existing business you had that was producing and rebuilding everything with now much clearer systems and boundaries and structure? Like what was the challenge there?
I think the challenge was really relationships and them falling apart. Like I said, not everyone responded really well to me making the change. And so that was difficult for them. And me being someone who's truly empathetic, who truly enjoys working with people, it's hard to know that you're burning a bridge, in that you have to burn the bridge in order to get to wherever the next step is. And even when I made the shift over to the COO agency model versus the VA business, having those boundaries in place and enforcing them, at first, it wasn't a muscle that I was used to flexing. And so that presented with internal challenges that others did not see. But then when my team started growing, I realized that, oh, I have to teach them how to enforce these same boundaries, because this is going to affect the health of the business. And I feel like that's something that doesn't get talked about enough. If you can't enforce your own boundaries as the CEO, your team also want to enforce those boundaries, even with your clients, and it can be hazardous. And so once I got to a point and I realized, actually, this is super simple. If my clients want the best outcome from the work that we're doing together, you have to respect the boundaries that I put in place, because I need space to strategize, to think, to understand, and to fill my cup. Because when I come to you, I'm pouring it out, all out in your behalf, so we can make more money, so we can make more impact, so we can do the things that are truly important to you. The KPI chart, we want the KPIs to keep going in the right direction. But if you're breaking my boundaries, that means I don't have space to ensure that we're doing that work together.
That's a really good positioning right there in terms of enforcing those boundaries. It reminds me of when my wife and I first met. We were on one of our earlier dates, and I was doing consulting work at the time and had a cell phone in the early days of cell phones. If I'm dating myself there, yeah, I know. And, I remember we're out having dinner, and, my phone buzzes. I look down and I'm like, sorry, just 1 second. And I get back to a client and I tune back into her. And then I think I had a phone call and I was like, sorry, just one moment. And I stopped and I looked at my phone and I looked up at this wonderful woman who I'm getting to know that I've just recently met. We're out on our first or second date. And I had that moment of what am I doing? Why am I half tuned in here and half tuned in there? This is the evening. This is outside business hours. Why am I making myself always available all the time? And so it was one of those switch flip moments where I decided I'm just not available outside of business hours, not on the weekends and all this. And wouldn't you know, that was a respected boundary by clients. Even the ones who were used to reaching me whenever, it was no problem. Because the next morning when I came online, I got back to them. I took care of whatever was needed and I reset that expectation. And it really wasn't as scary as it sounded. And fast forward to today, I sure am glad I did that because now I'm, married to this wonderful person who I got to know all those years ago. And so those personal boundaries are really great, especially in the face of the advice we hear about hustle harder, work longer hours, give it your all. And Simone, you did that, right? You saw that and the bank account looked great from it, but not other parts of the life. So talk to me about that transition, right? How did you communicate this transition to your clients in a way that they were receptive to? What did you learn from that? How could you have done that differently, better? What worked well? Help us understand communicating a big change like this to clients.
So the first thing I did, I sent out a mass email, and it's mass because I had so many clients at the time. And I wish I would have personalized a few of them a little bit more. The ones that were a little bit, deeper, that they relied on me a little bit heavier, I wish I would have gave them a phone call and then sent an email to explain it to them. And that's something one of those bridges. It didn't completely burn, but it was, it was a little warm. It was a little warm. There was a little heat there because they wanted that personal communication versus just, an email. For me, I thought an email would clearly explain what was going on. It would clearly, they can read it, they can refer back to it, they can have a chance to think of questions, but that's not how our relationship was. So for me to go and do that, for some of them, they completely understood. They were fine. But for others, it was a bit jarring. And so now when I'm having tough conversations with people, I never send an email first, ever. I always wait until we're face to face virtually, and I use my voice so they can hear and feel what I'm saying versus just reading words and they have to infer tone. And so that's something that I've picked up. I've had conversations with clients just this week, and I didn't send an email. I sat there, we chatted, we talked, we walked away. everyone was happy. And so that's something that I've really learned to do. I think coming in from different industries, people tell you to keep a paper trail and always, send an email. But that's not the type of business I have. That's not the type of clients I have. Those aren't even the type of people that I want to work with. So when those tough conversations come up, it's taught me to treat them in a certain way.
So what I'm hearing is use less of that legal background and more of that hairdresser background?
Exactly. Exactly.
That's so great. So, again, from a communication standpoint for our listeners, yes, you can do a broadcast email out to your clients about things like that. But, when possible, that warm personal contact makes all the difference. So, all right. We live in this world of like this toxic hustle mentality, right? Where you've got to just, do more, work harder, put in more hours. And, while you're sleeping, your competition is out there eating your lunch and all this nonsense, right? Where did you find the inspiration, the permission, the aspirational idea to build a business that prioritizes you and your team and other needs outside of just business growth over anything at all costs?
Well, besides the fact that I saw what it did to me, one unique position that I had from those VA days is that I saw CEOs burn out over and over and over. And I was the cleanup crew for a lot of them. I'm like, all right, well, what if we just do this? And, trying to help them out. But I just kept seeing it. I remember one of my clients got very, very sick because of it. And she wound up in the hospital for some time. I'm thinking about it. It's been 2 clients that's happened to. And so seeing them go through that phase and be that burnt out, I'm like, I can't do that. I can't do that at all. So that was one big thing. Something else was actually studying burnout. So part of one of my side quests, as I like to call it, was being a productivity coach. And I actually taught women how to come out of burnout because of my experience with it. And although that's not primarily what I'm doing today, that research, that deep study, those conversations that I was able to have really kind of helped me to understand, where did some of these certain traits come from? Why is it, especially with women, what systematically happened in the past to make us wind up where we are now? And after doing those studies, coming to understand our makeup, our DNA, it helped me to know, okay, this is what's needed to not be burnt out. And this is what I personally need. I can't work, 60-hour work weeks. I can't work weekends. That's a hard boundary. I'm at the point now where I can't even plan on the weekends. I don't want to plan. That will happen Monday morning. I don't want to touch or think about work. I want to read a book, crochet something, or spend time with my kids, go to the playground, and really fill my own cup. And that's personal productivity. And so really truly understanding what productivity is, because when you hear culture, you think, let's get more done. Let's get more done. But what if rest is the thing that enables you to get the things done and not just keep going? Because people equate productivity with busyness, but productivity means steps toward a goal. If you're getting rest, that's a step toward whatever the goal is.
And I think that whole concept of rest, like you're talking about, is so underappreciated, not well understood and undervalued. But, I find, so in the world of competitive athletics, right, as you're working on a running training plan or a cycling training plan, any of these things, there are built-in rest days. And even though you might want to go out there and hit it again and try harder, your body says, can do it to a certain level, but there's a certain magic in having that rest day, that well-earned rest day. And then the following day you get out there and your body's so much fresher and it really can show up in a whole other way. And that's a physical limitation. The mental ones, like you're talking about, that's showing up more mentally fresh, I think to a lot of people, it's undervalued, underappreciated. So I love that you've seen that, not with yourself, but also with your clients. So speaking of your clients, a lot of times founders, especially, our high 6-figure, low 7-figure business owners, are still the bottleneck in their business, right? They're used to being a solopreneur, and even though they have a team, they're still like this bottleneck. You've helped so many founders to replace the chaos with structure. What's like one of the most common results or benefits you see once you help a business owner no longer be a bottleneck in the business?
Time. They get time back. I have one client who I started working with recently, and he creates film websites. It's a really cool guy. But after working with him for a couple months, he said, oh, I actually have time to do the things in my business that I actually enjoy. And I was like, really? Yay. That for me is like the biggest compliment to work. That and money, but that's one of the biggest compliments to work, right? And so that's what they find, that once they remove themselves from the bottleneck and they bring in someone who actually understands how a business functions, they get their time back to be creatives. Like I primarily work with creatives. They get that time to be in their creative space, the thing that brings them joy. What I find is that a lot of my clients didn't get into business to necessarily run a business. They got into it to create impact for the thing that they love to create. And so they end up being put back into that creative zone that they so much enjoyed that they got away from because they're running their business. And that is like the biggest win that happens when they stop becoming the bottleneck.
So well done. I love that you're helping business owners to do that. It is such a common challenge, and you've got that solved. So amazing. So how is your ability to grow revenue, right, been impacted now that growth isn't necessarily tied strictly to your personal capacity? You can step away and have the business still run and grow. Talk to us about what that's like from a revenue standpoint.
Well, as great as I thought the VA revenue was, this revenue is better. Not only is it easier, there's more of it. So it's inherently better to know that I can go on a trip for, like I think I was telling you before, Jeremy, when we spoke, I ended up going on a trip to Bolivia for 2 weeks and things just kept going. I came back, there were no fires. All the clients were fine. I mean, I did some catch up work, read a lot of documents, caught up, but everything was fine. And it felt so good to be able to come back. The money is still coming in. Nobody's complaining. Nobody's threatening to leave. Everyone is happy. And then that's not only my business, but my clients' businesses too. So even inside of their team, I've set it up so everything is fine. There's even been times when my clients have gone away for a week or so and things just continue to keep going without them. And it is such a beautiful feeling. So, I mean, from, 5 years ago to now, to be able to make more money easier has really helped regulate my nervous system. I'm definitely spending a lot more time with my family, watching my kids grow up, spending time with my husband and my sisters and all of my friends. It's been beautiful. And so I'm excited for whatever the next level of my agency looks like, but it's been an incredible journey.
There's a graph I was looking at recently, and I've seen these numbers in a few different ways, but showing how it's something like 90+% of the time you'll ever spend with your kids in your entire life is in that sub 18 age range. And it might even be higher than 90%, but you can never get that time back. So for our listeners with young families, you can work hard now and hope to reconnect with your kids when they're older. But the reality is the bulk of that connection and the relationship building and the foundation and everything all happens at those younger ages. And sure, you can go build a business, but if it takes you away from them for an extended period, what are you really building it for, right? So I love that you're doing that. So aside from this time that you've gotten back and obviously the better money, what would you say are some of the other maybe unexpected benefits that you've seen since you focused on selling this value-based product and shifting your business model instead of just, selling time?
I think the ability to pour back into other people. People come to me for advice and even for mentorship sometimes. And that's been really fulfilling for me. Someone came to me the other day and asked for mentorship, and I was like, sure, no problem. What do you want to know? And so being able to pour into people in that way, people who are trying to understand the world outside of just being an operator, as people think COOs are, understanding what it means to actually be able to grow a business, understanding that they have roadblocks but can't really get through it, even inside their business. It's been really fulfilling and definitely not something that I expected to happen. I think also something that has happened is that the people who care about me, not like my friends or family, but like my audience that cares about me, they followed me throughout this journey. So they stayed on the path. And when I do something new, they're rooting for me. When I make a left turn, they're rooting for me. So that constant support is not something that I expect from, people who we don't have a deep personal relationship with, but it's something that really keeps me going and kind of helps me, when I have those days where I'm like, I don't know, I reflect on it and it keeps me moving in a positive direction.
So for our listeners who want to be focused in that positive direction, maybe they feel like their whole business would collapse without them. What's the first piece of advice you'd give to a business owner who's feeling stuck in their business so they could get unstuck and back to growth?
Well, I would ask a question first. That would be the first, again, me being the person who uncovers everything, right? I would ask a question. Why do you feel like it's going to walk away? It's going to burn down if you walk away. What happened? Has that happened before? What's going on with your team building and your ability to delegate? And so if you don't know how to build a good team, if you don't know how to delegate little by little, then that's something that I want you to spend some time in learning. Learn how to build a good team. Learn how to understand what a good person looks like, and don't base that on output, base it on outcome, because you will hire someone to do a job and they might do it differently from you, but they also might do it better than you. And you might not even expect that. You're hiring people we're not hiring clones out here. And so if you want to get from being the bottleneck, if you want to feel like you can walk away and it's not reliant on you, learn how to build a good team. That's like the first thing that I want CEOs to know how to do, because I feel like it's underrated and I don't hear enough about that.
Love it. So the power of the team is really what can help you to get unstuck. Huge. So knowing what you know now, looking back to that period in your life in 2020 and all, is there anything you would have done differently knowing what you know now?
There's so many things. There's so many things that I would have done differently. The first thing is I would have actually planned my capacity. Like I would have figured out how many clients until I know I need to bring someone on months before I got to that point. That's like the first thing I would have done. I also would have defined better the services that I held. Instead of doing social media management and doing system builds and doing blog posts and web editing. Oh my goodness, I was doing it all. I would have said this very specific thing is what I'm doing. I'm helping you with, client communication, whatever it is. I would have kind of niched down all the things because that would have kept my mind not so chaotic. And then I would have actually started long-term planning. Like I still would have wanted to end up at this point where I am a fractional COO and not still running a VA agency, but I would have done long-term planning to actually plan a path to get there versus it kind of being like I needed to completely pull out and step away. And then I would have set boundaries a lot earlier on in my career, and I would not have allowed anyone else to break them because at the end of the day, people only do what you allow them to.
That is solid management advice right there. So as a COO, not just for yourself, but with clients and all, numbers are important. We talk about KPIs. You mentioned that earlier in our conversation. What are the KPIs that are important to you to ensure that you're maintaining a calm, clear, and focused business?
So one thing I like to know is lead generation. Like, do we have people who are constantly inquiring with us? So I know that if someone drops off, that we have someone to replace them with. So knowing like we have a whole dashboard dedicated to leads that we're pursuing, and to ones that are inquiring as well. So that's something that's really important. Another thing is revenue. So how much money is actually coming into the business? And then how much are we spending specifically for me on tech tools? Like there are many things that businesses spend money on, but because I love integrating tech and tech helps me move faster, I can easily spend way too much and I can be over budget. And that can be the thing that tanks us financially if I'm not careful. So I specifically look at that bucket of expenses, tech tools, to make sure that I'm not going over the edge. And then I also map my capacity. Now I do, in my team's capacity. So I know when it's time to hire someone else on the team. So I know if we get one more client, that's it. Now I have to hire. And this is how much is allocated for that hire. So I track team time. I do check-ins with my team to figure out, okay, how much time are you spending? Who are you spending it on inside the business? Is it on a client or is it inside the business? And how much more time do you have left reasonably to dedicate before it's going to be not even too much, but right before it gets to being too much? We don't want to get you too much. So those are the things that I really try to map out and stay on top of.
So for our listeners, what I'm hearing here is a number of what we call leading indicators, right? Looking at revenue as a trailing indicator. You get to see how much you did and you got paid now. That's a trailing indicator. Your leading indicators are things like you're looking at number of leads coming in, because your numbers that when a certain number of leads comes in now, that's going to turn into a certain amount of revenue later on. And you're tracking capacity ahead of time. So you're not waiting until you're redlined and over the limit to start hiring. You know ahead of time the leading indicator for we need to hire now so we don't go over capacity later on. So leading indicators are huge, and I love that you're doing that. All right, so to recap for our listeners, you moved from a place of extreme burnout and a plateaued agency model to strategically repositioning your role to now be a fractional COO. That allowed you to scale through high leverage systems and leadership while reclaiming a lot of that personal freedom. So for listeners who want to learn more about you, Simone, where should they go right now?
They can go to my website, chiefalignmentagency.com. They can find me on LinkedIn and on Instagram at the Simone Little, or email me at hq@chiefalignmentagency.com.
Love that. So that was chiefalignmentagency.com. Simone, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing with us your journey and how you got to that burnout point and found your way through, got unstuck, and back to growth in an entirely new and wonderful direction. Really loved having you on the show. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Jeremy.
Thanks so much for listening. Quick reminder, hit that subscribe button right now so you can get more episodes when they come out automatically. And remember to leave that rating and review right now.